Alright, so as you may have already seen from the title of this video, after I installed the JCR exhaust on my car, I saw very unexpected results and outcomes, and so I wanted to build a video and share the experience, at least my experience, with the broader community. This is not to say that someone else's experience may be different. This is not to say that, you know, the results going to be the same on another car, but I just want to kind of put this video out there and share my experience with you. And so if you're looking to make the same decision, hopefully you have this as an additional data point to all the other data points that you have. So there are really four things that I want to talk about, right? The very first thing that I'd like to talk about is really my rationale for selecting JCR exhaust. So there are lots of exhaust systems out there in the market for the GT4. The reason I picked JCR predominantly was because they look cool, they have really good quality of product. This is an upcoming company, so it seems like they're putting a lot of effort into getting everything perfect and building a name for themselves, and you know, kind of going on Renless and seeing how they interacted with the rest of the community and how they were very proactive in answering the questions. I wanted to do business with them because it seemed like they're very customer experience and customer focused. And so Johnny has been kind of the lead who's been taking a lot of these questions, has been very engaged in the community, and so I had a good experience with him. So I guess you know, picking who you want to do business with was one of the reasons I picked JCR. In addition to that, if you look at their exhaust system, they're one of the only exhaust systems out there that give you that high tone that you would expect from a GT car, and so that was the second reason for me to pick the JCR exhaust. Also, they're, I believe, the only ones, or may not be the only one, but they're one of the few ones that actually build using titanium, so their exhaust system is substantially lighter compared to the other exhaust systems out there, so that was another reason. And so from the performance perspective, I think they're claiming around 12 horsepower and 13 additional torques that you get by kind of creating a better flow in the system, but all that combined was really the reason I picked JCR over the other ones. I had an initial conversation with Fabspeed, and they were very nice as well. They gave me some data points about their competition. If I wanted to go with maybe a steel exhaust, I probably would go with Fabspeed, but again, like, I want to get the best for my car. Now, I actually put in the order for the exhaust prior to purchasing the car itself, and predominantly that was because every review that I saw from this GT4 series, the 718, everyone unanimously complained about the car not sounding as good as it should. When I actually got the car, you know, I'm not going to say the car sounded amazing from the factory, but I would like to put it out there that it sounded a lot better than I originally anticipated, and therefore I feel like if you haven't heard the car in person, just wait to hear it, and then if you still don't like it or you want to improve the sound, then go look into another exhaust. So those are some of the reasons why I picked JCR. Now, the second part of what I want to talk about is really my experience with the JCR exhaust. I've had it for about 2 months now, and so there are some pros and cons that I would like to share with you. In terms of the cons, I'm sure you've already seen from the title of the video. When I did the baseline test, my car was putting out around 365 horsepower from the factory, and the way I did the braking period, I basically kept it under 4,000 RPM for the first 1,200 miles, and I didn't install the exhaust until after the braking period was over. And the rationale I had there was, you know, I wanted to make sure that the engine is performing at its optimal capacity, because within the braking period your engine has not been broken in yet, and therefore it's not putting out as as much horsepower as it should. So I wanted to give the engine the chance to be broken in, to be operating at its optimal level, and then do a baseline, and then install the exhaust and see the gains from the exhaust itself. Now, there are some other threads online. There's another well-respected YouTuber. His name is Yanko, and he's got, I think, a whole bunch of Porsches. And one of the videos that he did on his GT4, he was talking about how the exhaust is not for horsepower gains, and how your ECU essentially eliminates any horsepower gains or torque gains after you install a new exhaust, because it's essentially, the way he put it, it's built to ensure that everything, like all the outputs, are within the same threshold, and so even if you add a new exhaust system after a week or so, any gains that you may have already got may be reversed, because the ECU is adjusting the parameters to smooth everything out back to the factory outputs. Now, there's a lot of discussions, and there are a lot of claims that that's not true. I talked to Johnny from JCR, and he basically shut it down and said the gains from the exhaust are going to stick. And so the other reason why I wanted to do the exhaust installation and then the dyno test that I did after that was because I wanted to make sure that the horsepower, actually any gains that I may potentially have, actually do stick, right? So I did a baseline. The car was doing 365, and then a week later, on the same fuel tank, the same ambient temperature, humidity was maybe up by 10%. I took the car back in after a week. I did a dyno. Next 2 days after I did the initial baseline dyno, I installed the JCR exhaust. I drove the car around for about a week, and then I took the car back in for another dyno. Again, this is the same. Most of the parameters, with the exception of humidity, was identical. Again, humidity was up by 5%. And I took it back to Jotech. So I had the same technician, same dyno machine, again, same temperature, a bit higher humidity, but even the same fuel tank. So I went back to Jotech, and they're very reputable. If you know Jotech, they're a very reputable shop, performance shop out in Dallas. They predominantly work on Nissan GTRs, but they're very well known. And so I took it back to them, and they did the additional dyno, and the results were shocking. So after installing JCR exhaust, I actually lost 10 horsepower throughout the rev range, and I did gain I think 3 or 4 horsepower I gained at the top of the range, but throughout the range I actually lost 10 horsepower and a whole bunch of torque as well. So that was very disappointing. And just to remind you, each of the dyno tests, both for the baseline and the JCR exhaust dyno run, we did 3 runs for each test, right? So when I'm giving you the numbers, it's really an average of those 3 runs. It's not like one run was not done properly. And I know there's some conversation about the position of the air, the fans that blow air into the air intake. The position of the fans were identical throughout the test, so it shouldn't have been a difference. So if you look at the expected results, right? So I was expecting to get 10 horsepower. I actually lost 10 horsepower. So there's a 20 horsepower difference, right? And that is way too much to blame either on one parameter, like on the temperature, which in this case was identical, or on humidity, right? It's just way too much difference. And so that's one set of tests, which was very disappointing. The second set of tests I did a whole bunch of 0 to 60 using the PDK launch control. Same tire, same fuel. And before I get the car in, I was able to get the car launched from 0 to 60 using the PDK. I think around 3.9, and I do have pictures and videos of that. I'll try to post it in this video. So 3.9, 0 to 60, and then after I put in the JCR exhaust, I tried several times, and I was not able to get it launched from 0 to 60 below 4.2 or 4.3 seconds. Now I know they're launching from 0 to 60. There are a lot of parameters, depending on the temperature of your tires, depending on the ambient temperature, the surface. I know there are a lot of parameters, but I did everything I could to make sure that these parameters are identical. So I was testing in the same stretch of the road, same ambient temperature, same kind of fuel. And I did several launches. It was much easier to get the 3.9. I got it a lot earlier when I was doing the baseline test. And with the JCR exhaust, I did a whole bunch of launches until I just decided to give up. And I did see the tire temperature rising. So the air pressure was going up. So that was a sign that the tires are warming up, but nevertheless, I was never able to break it below 4.2. So all of that to me are some of the negative things about the JCR exhaust. Now, again, like someone else's experience may be different. I'm very curious to know if anyone else out there has done this kind of similar testing and what would be the outcome of the results with them. Now, I shared this feedback with JCR Johnny, and so John, I think we exchanged a couple of emails, and his feedback was essentially, because there was a 2-week or 1-week delay or gap between the baseline and then the JCR exhaust dyno test, these tests are not comparable, which I would not agree with. I talked to Kenny at JoeTech, and they wouldn't agree with it either. So this performance case should stick, given that majority of these parameters were identical in the baseline test as well as in the JCR exhaust test. And the other observation I had, like I was trying to push Johnny to give me any other additional data points. It seems like the only data point based on which they claim 10 horsepower gain is that spider. So if you look at the videos, and I'm talking only about the non-silence race pipes, right? There are some other videos and data points around like the whole JCR system, including the headers or over axle pipes. I'm not talking about those. Only looking at the back box, right, which is that non-silence race pipes, right? Only looking at that, they only have one data point, and that data point is that spider. So if you look up the video of that spider, from the factory, that spider is making around 355, and then after installing the JCR exhaust, it's making 369. And so it's identical, so that the after output is kind of identical to my after output, because I was making also 369. The spider was also making 369, right? But the big difference was the baseline. That spider's baseline was around 355. And so in my opinion, the baseline was not accurate because my baseline was 365 and it's just impossible. And let me remind you, they have better fuel in Europe than we do here. I'm running this on 93 octane, shell, and they're running that on 98, and so 355. I think maybe the braking period, it was within the period, or that was something that it caused the baseline performance to be so poor. So what I'm trying to get across is that I haven't seen any indication that JCR, addition of the non-silence JCR race pipes, adds horsepower to a point where your car goes beyond 369. And if my car stock was making 365, you're really looking at 3 horsepower at the top of the rev range and then losing 10 horsepower throughout the rev range. So overall, not a good deal, and so I was very much disappointed. So that's the first thing, right? So that was a negative. Let's talk about the positive, because there are positives, and I don't want to be kind of one-sided in this discussion. There are lots of positives about it, right? It's very light. It saves a whole lot of weight from the back of the car. and the sound is amazing, especially if you kind of drive it more sporty. It has that higher pitch kind of noise that you would expect from a GT car. You know, when you start up the car, it's a big difference. You can hear that. In my car, because I got in my exhaust, the exhaust that I got, because it's a non-silence exhaust, there's not a big difference between valve open and valve closed, but there's no decibel difference. And that's exactly what I wanted. I'm not dailying this car, so I'm okay with that. Now, the other thing I want to point out, maybe this is more on the negative side, is that even though JCR claims there's no drone, there's absolutely drone with the non-silence exhaust. And the drone is really from 2,000 RPM to 3,000 RPM, and it's pretty boomy, right? If you're driving in a PDK, it's, you know, you're driving around the city, you haven't put it in like the sport mode or the PDK sport mode, or if you haven't put it in a manual mode, you're just driving around the city, it really likes to kick the gears up and have you at 7,000 RPM. Sorry, at the 7th gear, not 7,000 RPM. So because it kicks you to the 7th gear very often, your RPM really varies from 2,000 to 3,000 very often if you're cruising around, especially in a PDK car. In a manual car, you are in control, right? So in my case, when I'm driving the car on the highway or anything like that, I have to make sure I put it in manual and I don't go beyond 6th gear, because otherwise the drone is unbearable. I've shot a video of the droning sound. It's not as loud in the video as it is in real life, but I think it will give you an indication of that, and I will play that throughout this video. So those are kind of some of the pros and cons, but overall, and I thought about selling it. I know that a lot of people on the market looking for JCR exhaust. I thought about selling it, but since I've already made the investment and I've already put the effort into installing the exhaust on my car, and because it sounds good, I'm just going to live with it for the duration that I own the car. Yeah, I wish it was a better experience, and I really encourage you guys, if you're looking to buy the JCR exhaust and you have a GT4, I really highly encourage you to do it before and after. The dyno runs only costed me like $150, and so it's cheap enough where, at least for the sake of community, you want to do it and to build some more knowledge around how much gains you can expect from an exhaust, and in this specific case from the JCR exhaust. So that's that. Now if I go back in time, I guess alternatively I would have been interested in picking the Akrapovic. One benefit to Akrapovic compared to JCR is that right around the rear of the muffler, they keep that boxy design. So if you take a look at the underneath of the car, from the factory, the mufflers actually are boxy, and in my opinion, that boxiness is helping channel the air on, in the underbody of the car. So now if you look at my car now with the JCR exhaust, that bulkiness is gone, so there's a big hole, right? And it's hard to explain. I'll get the video camera there and I'll try to show you guys, but I wonder if this is going to have some downside implications on the underbody airflow, because not everything is channeled all the way out anymore and there's a big gap, versus in Akrapovic they have that boxy design. So it may, based on my limited knowledge, may be better for your underbody airflow getting the Akrapovic, as well as it sounds great, and I believe it's made out of titanium, so it's a lot lighter. So yeah, so there you have it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the video clips that I've got from the exhaust. Alright, so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about droning. So with 7th gear, just holding steady, doing 65, it's just continuous. And it gets really loud. Kind of unbearable. So the way you fix that is, so okay, there we go. Now it's a little bit more quiet because I'm not hovering around 2000.